Ireland Assembly, Senate Chamber, Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Senate Chamber, Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Senate Chamber, Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Senate Chamber, Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Senate Chamber, Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Senate Chamber, Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Senate Chamber, Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Senate Chamber, Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Senate Chamber, Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Senate Chamber, Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Senate Chamber, Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Senate Chamber, Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Senate Chamber, Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Senate Chamber, Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Senate Chamber, Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Senate Chamber, Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Senate Chamber, Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Senate Chamber, Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Senate Chamber, Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Senate Chamber, Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Senate Chamber, Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Senate Chamber, Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Senate Chamber, Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Senate Chamber, Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Senate Chamber, Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Senate Chamber, Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Senate Chamber, Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Senate Chamber, Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Senate Chamber, Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Senate Chamber, Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Senate Chamber, Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Senate Chamber, Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Senate Chamber, Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Senate Chamber, Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Senate Chamber, Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Senate Chamber, Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Senate Chamber, Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound.
Meeting. You're all very welcome to the meeting today. Just to give members a brief overview of some of the topics we're going to cover today. We have 2 oral evidence sessions with departmental officials. The first on the 2021 to 22 October monitoring round and budget 22-25 process, and the second on the results of the consultation and proposed next steps in relation to the proposed strategy for supporting and challenging women and girls in contact with the justice system. We'll have a summary of the committee's informal deliberations on the damages return on investment bill. We'll have the civil jurisdiction and judgments 2005 Hague Convention and 2007 Hague Convention Amendment Regulations 2022. And we also have written papers on domestic abuse offence training and awareness materials, implementation of the recommendations of the Gillen review into serious sexual offences in Northern Ireland and deaths abroad, the final report on the commencement of Section 49(1) on the Coroners and Justice Act 2009. So we are going to start the meeting in public session, and as always you're welcome to have your mobile device out, but can you please just make sure it's muted or it's on airplane mode. As members know, we're obliged to declare any financial or other relevant interests that might reasonably be thought by others to influence their approach to the matter under consideration. So if any members have any declarations of interest, now's your chance to raise them. Okay, I don't see any members indicating, so we'll move on. So can I get agreement from members for the 2 oral evidence sessions to be reported by Hansard? Yep. Thank you. Okay, so we'll start on the pack, and if you go to agenda item 1, apologies, and we have apologies from the Chair, Mervyn Story, from Doug Beattie and from Emma Rogan. We have Rachel Woods and Sinead Bradley joining us on Starleaf, so they're very welcome.
Chair, at this stage from an apology, I may have to leave the meeting for a short time. I'm waiting a call. Thank you.
Okay, Sinead, no problem. Thank you. Gemma Dolan and Peter Weir are here in person, but I know Peter has to leave the meeting at 4 and Gemma has to leave for a short period as well. So I know members have delegated authority. Is that right?
Yes, sorry. Marvin Story has delegated his vote to Peter Weir. Emma has delegated her vote to the Deputy Chair, Sinead, and Gemma Dolan has delegated her vote to the Deputy Chair during the short time she may have to leave the meeting.
Okay, no problem, thank you. Okay, if we move on to agenda item 2, which is the draft minutes of the meeting held on the 23rd of September. You'll find this at pages 5 to 17 of your pack. I presume members have had a chance to look through them, and are members content that the minutes in the pack are a true reflection of the proceedings of the meeting held on the 23rd of September?
Great.
Agreed, thank you. So I'll sign, I don't think we have them here, but I'll sign them. Yep, I'll sign them at some stage before the meeting's over. Okay, so agenda item 3 is matters arising. So first up we have the Department of Justice correspondence requesting changes to the Committee Forward Work Programme. So members, the department has asked for 5 proposals for statutory rules that all relate to the Licensing and Registration of Clubs Amendment Bill to be added to the work programme for the meeting on the 21st of October. And it also wants to rename the title of the other SL1 scheduled on that date. You'll find information relating to this at pages 19 and 20 of the pack. So are members in agreement that we make those changes to our forward work programme?
Great.
Thank you. Item 2, there is a letter from an individual on the legislative consent motion on the Public Service Pension and Judicial Offices Bill. The Committee for Finance is currently considering a legislative consent motion on the Public Service Pension and Judicial Office Bill and wrote to the other relevant statutory committees to request views and comments. At the meeting last week, the committee agreed that a draft response based on the scrutiny undertaken on relevant areas covered in the LCM would be prepared and circulated to members for agreement to enable a response to be sent to the Finance Committee in time for its meeting yesterday. No comments were received on the draft response, and it was forwarded to the Finance Committee. And that information relating to that is at pages 3 to 11 on the tabled pack for members' information. We did have an individual who wrote to the committee with comments on the provisions within the LCM on Public Services Pensions and Judicial Offices Bill. This was circulated to members by email last Friday, and that's found at 21 to 23 of the meeting pack. And the correspondence refers to pensions for prison officers, which fall within wider public sector pensions for which the Department of Finance is responsible, and this was therefore not considered by the committee. So can I ask members just to note that item of correspondence? So item 3 is a response from the NI Human Rights Commission on the proposed legislative consent motion on the Police, Crime, Sentencing and Courts Bill. The committee agreed at the meeting on the 9th of September to forward the Department of Justice response dated the 17th of August to the issues raised by the NI Human Rights Commission on the proposed legislative consent motion on the Police, Crime, Sentencing and Courts Bill to the Commission for information and any further comments it may wish to make. The Human Rights Commission has responded, indicating that it has received a copy of the draft Code of Practice in respect of data extraction from mobile devices, which it had raised in previous correspondence, and has provided a response to the Department. The Commission has urged the Committee to protect the monitoring and review of oversight functions and had no further comments to add at this time in respect of the other provisions that will be included in the LCM, and the correspondence relating to that item is found at pages 12 to 13 of the tabled paper. And can I just remind members that the Department also wrote to the Committee on the 16th of June to advise that the Executive did not agree to the inclusion of the measure relating to the extraction of information from mobile devices in the LCM, but may return to the issue once the Code of Practice has been drafted and consulted on. So members, on the back of that, I just want to seek agreement from yourselves to forward the NI Human Rights Commission correspondence to the Department of Justice, and also request assurance that the Commission's view on the Code of Practice will be conveyed to the Home Office, and request details of other stakeholders that the Department has consulted with on the Code of Practice. Are members in agreement with that approach?
Great.
Thank you. Okay, item 4 is the Troubles Permanent Disablement Payment Scheme. The arrangements are being made for the informal meeting with the Victims Payments Board to discuss the Troubles Permanent Disablement Payment Scheme and the arrangements for monitoring its operation to take place on Wednesday the 6th of October at 10 a.m. and that will be via Microsoft Teams. The Chair and possibly some other members of the Committee for the Executive Office will also participate in the meeting, given the Executive Office is the sponsor department for the Victims Payment Board. And just for members' information, an email was sent to them earlier today regarding the meeting and basically just asking us to advise the committee team as soon as possible if we wish to attend, and so that they can make the necessary arrangements and that can be all finalised. So that's really just for members to note.
Sure, just it helps. I'm not available at that, certainly from my point of view, not available at that time at the same time as the Economy Committee's sitting. So,
okay.
I think we were trying to get it organised because the committee had wanted it before the 7th.
no, I understand. I'm not in any way suggesting that there's any alteration of the time, but just from the point of view of an apology or whatever in relation to that.
Okay, thank you, Peter. So agenda item 4, the 2021 to 22 October monitoring round and the budget 22 to 25 process. And this is our first oral evidence session with departmental officials. So we have officials attending the meeting today via Starleaf, and they're going to outline the department's October monitoring round position and information gathering for the budget 22 to 25 process. So the papers in relation to this are at pages 36 to 109 of your pack. So we have been given very helpfully just some issues that we may wish to discuss after the evidence session. So I think members will have a chance to have a look at those and probably find them quite useful. So just can I welcome to the meeting Deborah Brown, the Director, Justice Delivery Directorate, Andrea Quayle, Head of Financial Planning, Strategy and Support, and Louise Blair, Head of Financial Planning and Support at the Department of Justice, to the meeting. So you're all very welcome, and thank you so much for joining us for this item. And just to make you aware that this session will be reported by Hansard, and the transcript will be published on the committee's webpage. So I think it's yourself, Deborah. Are you going to kick us off? If you want to give us just an outline of the October monitoring round position and the 22 to 25 budget process.
Yeah, thank you. Can I just check that you can hear us okay?
Yes, we can, yeah.
That's super, thank you. So good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to provide an update on the DOJ budget. As you stated, joining me this afternoon, I have Andrea Quayle, our Head of Financial Planning Strategy, and Louise Blair, our Head of Financial Planning Support. So today we are going to aim to give you an update on where we are on our October monitoring round and on the returns that have been submitted to date as part of the budget gathering exercise for 22 to 25. Returning to the main area for discussion today, October monitoring round. This is the second monitoring round of the year, and as you're aware, this year continues to be very difficult in terms of our budget pressures and the continuing uncertainty created by COVID-19. When finalising the budget 21-22, the department had significant resource pressures, which at that stage were estimated at £55 million, excluding the COVID-19 pressures. This reduced to approximately 27.7 million as a result of a reduction in the PSNI pressures of 14.3 million and an in-year allocation of 9.8 million for the PSNI. These pressures are further reduced to 23.9 million in the June monitoring round. In June monitoring round, the department bid to DOF for these pressures of 23.9 million, plus 16 million for compensation services pressures resulting from a change in the personal injury discount rate, a total bid of 39.9 million. Allocations for the June monitoring round totalled 11.5 million, leaving pressures exiting June monitoring round of 28.4 million pounds. As part of the October monitoring round, the pressures have been reviewed again, and they have further reduced to 25.4 million. While there have been some movements of pressures increasing and decreasing across our business areas, the main change here is a reduction in the pressure being faced by compensation services in respect of the personal injury discount rate of £3 million. The compensation services pressure was estimated on a range of pressures estimated at that point, and we bid to DOF for £16 million. That has now been updated and has reduced by £3 million. The Executive did provide £5 million as part of the June monitoring allocation, and therefore this is a pressure of £8 million. DOF has advised that negotiations are ongoing with HMT in relation to these costs, and should funding be received from HMT, this will be held centrally for reallocation. There does, however, remain uncertainty in relation to the timing and the quantum of these settlements, and we will continue to keep these under review throughout the year. In relation to PSNI pressures within the 25.4 million, a bid will be submitted to DOF in the October monitoring round for 3.4 million in relation to the EU exit pressures, as the funding required for the Northern Ireland Protocol to HMT will not be met at this stage. The COVID-19 pressure is being bid for of 1.1 million and a McLeod pressure of £134,000. So overall, taking all of this into account, the Department will submit bids to TOF of 25.4 million, which are set out in Annex 1 of your paper, and this includes the £8 million for the compensation services payments. Should all of these pressures be met, the Department would leave the October monitoring round with £1.7 million of unallocated funding and £334,000 earmarked for Gillen, with pressures remaining of £1.275 million, and these pressures, along with any unmet bids, would then be reviewed following October monitoring round and considered again at the January monitoring. Also to highlight that we do have some ring-fenced easements, and as a consequence those must be surrendered. These total £914,000, and they relate to the Office of the Police Ombudsman for Historical Investigations of £430,000, the Together Building a United Community programme of £295,000, and COVID funding of £189,000. Moving now to capital, in the 21-22 budget was allocated in full as part of the opening budget exercise, and we did leave June monitoring round with an easement of £846,000. Further easements have now been identified as part of the October monitoring round, bringing the total to £2.276 million, which will now be surrendered to DOF. As part of the October monitoring round, we will also update our ring-fenced resource DEL, which is a technical budget to cover depreciation and impairment costs. We have received bids of £4.3 million for ring-fenced resource DEL, for which the Department currently holds £1 million. We will allocate that and bid for the remainder of £3.2 million. This would leave the Department with no remaining unallocated ring-fenced resource DEL. We have also reduced our annually managed expenditure budget, and we will agree movements and bids as part of this round of £33.7 million. Moving now to the Budget 22-25 process. Budgets beyond 21-22 have not yet been set. The Department of Finance formally commissioned the Budget 22-25 process, the information gathering exercise for Resource DEL, on the 6th of August. You have been provided with a copy of our return, and this exercise continues. The capital exercise was commissioned by the Department of Finance on the 9th of September, with those returns being due this week. The Chancellor formally commenced a multi-year spending review on the 7th of September, with the outcome to be announced on the 27th of October. The Executive's funding envelope is set by the spending review, and therefore our ability to set a multi-year budget is constrained by the period which is covered by that spending review. Treasury has announced that the period to be covered by that spending review will be the 3 years for both Resource DEL and Capital DEL, and DOF intend to plan the Executive's budget on this basis. So in conclusion, I hope that this has provided a useful overview of where we are in terms of our financial position in the DOJ, and we will continue to keep this under review as this is a very challenging budget at this stage. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to brief you, and we very much value the role and the views of the committee, and we're happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Yeah, that was very useful. Thanks very much. I have a couple of questions, and then I know Peter's looking in, and I'll open it up to other members as well. Firstly, just on the returning of the 914,000, specifically the 430k for the police ombudsman, the 295 for TBUC, and the 189 for the courts service COVID funding. Could you give us just a wee bit more detail just on that? Why was it not used? What was the reason?
First out, whatever's left.
Okay, so moving to these first of all, with regard to our courts and tribunals, the COVID funding, so they had some increased pressures and also some easements within the COVID funding, but because it was given for those purposes, we have to return it to DOF as that was the purpose for which it was intended. There has been some issues with regard to the TBUC fund where there was a little bit of slippage, and so that will be returned to the centre and hopefully will be used for other TBUC programmes. And then the other one, which was the Oponi one, with regard to this one, this is where we have some easements coming out of the office of the Oponi, and sorry, I'm just looking for my exact lines on this one. Yes, so we had an easement at June monitoring round of 1.1, and now we have this further easement of 430. This is where we had late notification of the budget allocation to Oponi, and so therefore that delayed their ability to proceed with the recruitment of staff, and so therefore at this stage this is a slippage on this, so it shouldn't create any additional pressures, but does just push the requirement for the funding into future years.
Okay, thank you for that, Deborah. And just on the bid of 3.4 million for the PSNI Brexit pressures and implementation of the protocol, just wondering if you can give us some understanding or more detail around what those specific pressures are. I know in the pack, the mention around criminal activity and such, but has there been any evidence that there is or there will be increased criminal activity to justify the 3.4 million?
So part of this is to do with recurrent costs, which is to do with 308 existing officers, which were recruited back in 1819, and therefore we have to make sure that we are continuing to fund those moving forward. There also are things around the C3 portal units and the CCTV systems that are needed across the designated ports. And the PSNI wish to retain the additional EU exit posts going forward to ensure that those benefits can be realised. There is certainly still uncertainty associated with the outworking of the protocol, including the longer term arrangements around replacing the temporary and the time-limited and grace period solutions which were agreed under the protocol. And depending on how these issues are resolved, there may be further downstream impacts that might be felt. So I think it's one of those ones where it is continuing to be kept under review, but these are existing costs where they've put in staffing, etc., in order to manage the protocol moving forward.
Okay, thank you for that, Deborah. Okay, I have Peter and then I have Robin.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Deborah, and the team for the information you've given so far. I want to break down just my questions into two sections, but I'll try and get each section just in one go. First of all, on the monitoring round side of it, those three issues just I want to touch on. I know the Chair touched on the police ombudsman's money, but it does appear to be in a number of occasions where I think that there has been an underspend there and money has had to be allocated back. So I suppose I want to check up, first of all, are the Department confident that the baselines for the Police Ombudsman's Office are got correct? Secondly, if you can give me a bit more detail, I mean, it's welcome that seeking additional money, but I suppose then the issue is whether there's additional pressure or rising demand in terms of referrals. there's obviously a bid in for 300,000 in terms of modern slavery victims, and it's important that they are supported. But I suppose it's maybe to get a sense of where that's directed. And is this sort of showing increasing problems within issues around trafficking? And thirdly, on the monitoring side of it, on the capital side, there appears to be then an increase in terms of levels of easements. And again, just in terms of the capital budget, if you could maybe just give us a bit more detail as to where those have come from and how those have arisen, just. And I'll come to the one.
So with regard to the issue around our current underspends, the issue here moving forward is that we continue to monitor the impacts of COVID as we move forward, and we are in uncertain times. This is the position that we are at the moment. The underspends here are quite small. There are significant pressures that we're facing, which is why we are bidding for such a substantial amount at this point in time. The modern slavery, Andrew, do you want to say the modern slavery? I think the requirements in modern slavery has increased. They have a baseline of about £350,000. So we have a statutory obligation, obviously, to provide support to the victims. Back in 2021, there was approximately a need for about 300,000 more than the budget, and we were able to make savings elsewhere to try and manage those moving forward. This is one that we will keep under review, but again, it's one that we do place significant focus on, and to make sure that we're able to provide funding.
Is that through increased identification of victims? It's maybe a slightly double-edged sword, because if you're seeing, if we're catching more perpetrators and therefore supporting more victims, obviously that's a good thing. On the flip side of the coin, the fact that the need for that level of additional spend is maybe showing that the problem at least is not dissipating, it's increasing. It would maybe be useful to get, if we can, even in writing, get a bit more detail just in connection with that.
Sure, absolutely. Look, I will take that away and try and get some more detail for you.
Just then on the capital side.
Okay, so on our capital. So within this, the largest easement that we had in our capital was about £500,000, which was to do with the state authority case management system. That has a budget of about £1 million for the introduction of this system, but unfortunately the timeline for that has slipped, and that will slip obviously into next year. We estimate that we just need the £500,000 this year, so we will keep that under review. The other ones are much smaller amounts. We have a bit of a slippage in our remote evidence centre, where there has changed the timing of the programme there. We have some delays in some of our ICT projects in the prisons. We have small slippages in a few projects in forensic science. And there were some fit-out costs for offices which weren't then actually needed. So those are the reasons for the small number of easements that we have in our capital budget at this stage.
Okay, and then just want to ask 2 points just on the budget moving forward. First of all, do you have any indication of what total liabilities in terms of the McLeod judgment across the department agencies will be? Any estimate of that? And secondly, I know that the PSNI have outlined, in terms of transformation side of things, they've outlined, I feel like, 3 business cases. One in terms of police numbers, but also in terms of digital services and estates. And we know quite often with transformation, the aim obviously is that any transformation can produce certain long-term savings, but it's almost inevitable that forms of transformation tend to have an upfront cost before they start achieving those. And I'm just wondering, in terms of the looking ahead towards the bids, unless I've got this wrong, that there's an allocation in terms of the increase in police numbers, but there doesn't appear to be moving ahead particular bids in terms of additional transformation costs on either the digital or the estate side of things. So I'm just wondering if maybe you could give an explanation on that as well.
Okay, so the digital and the estates are both capital projects, so those are being considered as part of the capital exercise, and you're absolutely right, there are significant large costs involved in those, and those business cases are currently under development, and we're working closely with the PSNI on those. And there is also an associated business case being constructed around the police numbers. Sorry, can I just ask, I didn't quite catch what the liability was that you
Just
you
in
mentioned.
relation to the McLeod judgment.
Okay, so that is one that is across the board. You know, the figures at this moment are very high level estimates that will depend on the number of people that come forward. We have made DOF aware of our position on that, but we don't have numbers that we'd be able to quote at this stage.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Peter. You finished yet?
Yep.
Thank you. Robin, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Can I thank the officers for coming to the committee today? Just a couple of questions. Can I just ask, in terms of the department has identified a number of areas which should be considered as exempt from reductions. Can I maybe just ask you to concentrate maybe a bit on the area around the tackling paramilitarism and T-Buck being exempt from reductions? And I ask that question really in terms of, I'm not saying I wouldn't be supportive of that, but because I have been pushing to have certainly the lines around T-Buck altered to bring in areas of need. And obviously the paramilitary situation has not improved. So can I ask maybe the department to talk around that area, please?
So both T-Buck and the tackling paramilitarism are cross-departmental initiatives being led by the TEO. We only have a small element of this funding. In regards to the tackling paramilitarism, there's an allocation from the executive, and then there's also an allocation from the UK government. As far as I'm aware, there has been work done which supports this amount of funding, and indeed I think would actually highlight that there's a requirement for additional funding. We know that spending in this area is something that would save money obviously in the longer term, and so therefore from our point of view it's really important that an important programme like that and T-Buck are both ring-fenced to make sure that we can realise the benefits from those as soon as possible.
Okay, and is it possible, I know they're multi-funding, but is it possible for those to be moved into the department's baseline?
No, because they're cross-cutting, they are always held in the responsible department.
Okay.
Because what they do is they look at the programme and then they look at what are all the projects which are delivering on the objectives, and then they decide who needs what in what year, etc. And it also has the benefit that whenever we return funding, it can be redistributed across the other departments, so it does work in a more streamlined way.
Okay. Can I ask, I mean, I know I'm not the only elected representative to be looking for some T-Buck money to be spent in their constituency and so on. How do we arrive at a situation when we're tackling all of the issues around deprivation and so on, that we end up returning in T-Buck terms, such a significant amount of money? How do we arrive at that situation?
So I think with T-Buck, we are dependent on other partners around our delivery on these and how they are prioritised. So I think that the T-Buck budget, when it's being managed centrally, allows for that kind of element of slippage. So whenever you're planning, you will have a number of projects who, if they actually did all deliver, might actually exceed your budget, but you know that you always have an element of slippage. So actually, you're always relying on the fact that there will be a bit of slippage in your planning. So I don't think that that's to be unexpected in the way in which we manage all of those programmes centrally.
Yeah, but it's not a wee bit of slippage, it's a significant amount. Just, I can't find it here, but just confirm for me what the amount is.
2,905, or sorry, 295,000.
£300,000 is not an insignificant amount of money, Chair, in terms of community work. And considering it's within fairly tight geographical areas. Okay, can I ask then?
I will assure that it goes back into the centre and will be used for other projects in T-Buck.
Yeah, that's fair enough. At least others may value, but it was allocated for these projects, and we've failed to spend it in that area. Okay, that's fine. Can I ask about the revenue raising and particularly around court fees. How do our court fees compare with England, Scotland and Wales, or indeed even the Republic?
I do not have that sort of detail with me. I apologise. I can get that for you.
So we don't know whether our court fees are higher or lower?
Colleagues in the department will, but we in finance don't have that information with us today, but we can get that for you.
But we've identified court fees as a potential revenue raising.
Yes, and that's where we're exploring it, and we would be taking into account and exploring what those fees would be by looking at what's happening in other jurisdictions. But the challenges here will be the time delay in us being able to put this in place, because we will need secondary legislation. So by the time we are able to realise savings, we could be a couple of years down the line. But I can get you some information on how they currently compare to England and Wales and Ireland.
Okay, I think that would be useful, Chair, if that was the mind of the committee to receive that. I just note that, we have been able to recover an increase from, in 2016, 73% to 77% in March 2020. Are we even considering perhaps building in an inflationary cost as opposed to maybe just increasing the cost? Maybe the same thing a different way, but...
I can just get that information clarified for you.
Okay, all right. Just one last one then. Yeah, sorry, maybe just, I've lost my place, Chair. Maybe just ask you the officials to clarify the next stages of the draft process. And can I come back if I find my place? Can I come back?
No, we'll not put you under pressure. No, that's okay, Robin. We'll come back to you at the end. So we'll go to Gemma, Rachel, and then Sinead, and we'll come back to you, Robin.
All right, okay, thank you,
Gemma,
Chair.
go ahead.
All right, thanks, Chair, and thank you, Deborah, Andrea and Louise, for your presentation. Can I just ask, can I go back to the areas Robin was talking about, the key priority areas within the budget that the department want exempt from cuts? What criteria is used by the department to determine which areas should be exempt from reductions?
So when we look at the areas for reduction, we're looking at those areas where we have limited control over the costs, where they are deemed to be a key priority. So you will see there we have obviously the EU exit. That's funding that would have a significant impact if we did not get that going forward. Legacy remains a key priority for the department. The issue around PSNI police officers, you'll be aware of the NDNA commitments, etc. on that. So those are the sorts of criteria that were used in establishing these. You'll see legal aid in there. Legal aid is demand-led, and indeed the legal aid baseline budget is actually insufficient to meet the demand that we have experienced over the last number of years, and have always had to bid in year. With regard to the compensation services, again, you're made aware of the challenges that we have now with the increases around the statutory discount rate, and again, that is a demand-led service. So again, that's why we would be saying that there should not be any cuts to that either. And then we've already discussed the cross-cutting ones around tackling paramilitarism and TBUC.
Okay, yeah, thanks, that makes sense. And my other question is, in terms of the bids that the department's submitting to meet a range of resource pressures, what plans will be put in place to manage these pressures if the bid is unsuccessful?
So we will await the outcome of the October monitoring round, which we hope would be towards the end of October, and we will then sit down and look at what we have managed to secure, and look at the remaining pressures and where we have any ability to slow down or stop expenditure, as the case may be. However, as you can see from the bids, there are some things in there which are now truly inescapable around pay and price, etc. So there will be limits around what we can do, but we do plan to come back in early November when we know the outcome of October monitoring round to decide what are our next steps.
Okay, that's okay. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Gemma. Rachel, do you want to go ahead?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for your presentation and the pack that was given to us for today. There's been a number of questions already asked, and I just want to bring back to TBAC, and apologies if this has already been asked. I'm quite difficult with my sound here in Bangor with the internet. The TBAC 295 grand, that was for, and it was being returned because of slippage. Is that because particular projects didn't go ahead because of the COVID pandemic?
No, it's not because of COVID. There was a small easement. It's a two-phased project, which is being taken forward with DFC and IFI funding. So DFC are covering some of the costs in the 21-22, but the costs that relate to us around the removal of the Ballygomartin interface and its replacement won't now be incurred until next year.
Okay, thank you. So the 200 and that was the 295 grand was for that one particular project, and then that would be basically that's going to come back then next year. So we'll see this next year.
Yeah. So as I say, the way they'll get management would be anticipate slippage in these projects. So that'll go back in, and whoever can use it this year will, and hopefully in our allocation next year will be reallocated it back out. Okay,
thank you. Sorry, just to clarify that. Okay, in terms of the departmental letter that was part of our pack under M, it says the department is submitting a bid as part of money around 65,000 for legal aid costs in relation to the personal injury discount rate litigation cases on access to justice. What legal costs are these? Because I see in the table in Appendix 1, it also says compensation services for change in the personal injury discount rate June bid, 16 grand. Funding received is 5,000, sorry, this is millions, apologies, 16 million, 5 million, revised June pressure 11 million, and then the October bid is 8 million. What's that for, and what's the difference then between the legal costs and the compensation services?
And then Louise, cover that one, thank you.
The smaller amount, the 65,000 in relation to access to justice, that's legal costs of as far as I understand, a JR against the department. So that's the department's legal costs in relation to that. And then in terms of the bigger amounts against compensation services, so that's the increase in the compensation payable to victims under the new personal injury discount rate, obviously the rate that's in at present under the old scheme, and then obviously that will potentially change then in January or in early in the new year. So that's the pressure arising in compensation services for the victims' payments.
Okay, so that was just what I wanted to clarify. So the June bid was 16 million. That would have been the interim rate then. And there was received was 5 million, and then the October bid, it was revised down then to 11. It was revised down because there wasn't as many people claiming or settling at that time.
There's a number of uncertainties around this, which is quite outside the department's control, both in terms of the timing and the quantum of the amounts. So we have updated the forecast pressure based on the information that we know at this point in time. And again, we'll review that very closely. We're keeping a very close eye on it in advance of January monitoring.
Thank you. Sorry, it's just obviously the committee's looking at the bill at the moment and today. So it's good to get some sort of numbers in terms of budgets. Finally for me, Chair, on page 50 on template 1, the strategic assessment form under legal aid, it says that there's legal aid pressure, which has been stated at 17.8 million funding shortfall over the next number of years. Then goes on to say it will be further exacerbated by the Domestic Abuse and Civil Proceedings Act, which was passed this year, and given the amendment, which would further increase the cost of the legal aid bill against the advice of DOJ. But no further financial pressure, though, has been itemised underneath that section. It's just if there's going to be further increase of the cost of legal aid bill with regard to the amendment in the domestic abuse bill, has there been any financial sort of forecasting on that? Obviously, 17.8 million funding shortfall over those years, but hasn't been outlined. Is that going to be outlined?
So within the pressures that are faced by LSA, they have taken into account at this point what they know around the impacts of those. So those are all factored in at this stage. And as I said earlier, the LSA does start a bit behind the ball because it has not got a baseline that has met its demand in the past number of years. Then you have the issues about the catch-up with regard to COVID, etc. And then you also have us meeting the demand that's coming through and the additional pressures that are caused by the different bills, the domestic abuse bill and others. So there's a number of things that are built in behind that figure work.
Thank you. And just finally, I maybe don't have the info, just in terms of the, it was against the advice of the Department of Justice. Was that specific advice that was given by the Department of Justice?
Sorry,
was that advice from Legal Services Agency?
This is the template that you're reading.
Yeah, it's page 50 of our pack. It's template 1, strategic assessment form. Which is the paragraph that says that the Act as amended in the Assembly will further increase the cost of the legal aid bill against the advice of DOJ.
So this is where we're having to work through the issues around the waiver. So there are costs associated with removing the financial eligibility issue. So those are increased costs which we had never built into our business case, and as you know, we're now currently working our way through that. So that's what that is referencing.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Sinead?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the officials for being here. And a lot has been covered. And I just wanted to know, just picking up on Rachel's final point, whether that is normal process to write against the advice of the department. I don't know why that's stated. A bill is a bill, as far as I'm concerned, and I'd just be keen to know if we could have feedback if that is common practice and if there are examples of that type of language being used at that stage in terms of measures. And I appreciate that it wasn't something that was factored in, and maybe there's a note to officials more than anything else, but it is quite sensitive in my view. And if I could go back, and Chair, a lot has been answered, to be fair, so I'm not going to labour on anything unnecessarily, but I would like to go back to the T-book again, if that's okay. And it's about the money that was being returned, and we've already established that that was down to just one scheme, which took me a bit by surprise, and I would be eager to know just a little bit more detail on what that one scheme is and why it was delayed and how exactly that amount of money, because it is quite sizable amount of money. I know it's referenced as small, and it may be small in terms of the overall budget, but it's still a significant amount of money, as is the 189,000 for the Northern Ireland Courts and Tribunal Services in terms of COVID money. And I'd be eager to know that is the slippage, but what is that? What sort of percentage is that of the overall budget that was allocated to the COVID-19 money? And why was that unable to be spent? And I know it was unable to be spent, and that has been repeated, but I haven't really heard why. What happened to disallow spending on that? Thank you.
Okay, so we'll need to come back to you on the further detail on the T-book. I've given you what I have on it at this point, so we'll come back on that one. On the COVID, I think our total spend, our total budget on COVID at the moment is 28.4 million, and we've got bids of another 1.1 million in this round. As I say, because it was allocated for the purposes intended, that's why it has to go back. But overall, we're not in an underspend position on our COVID, but I'll maybe let Louise give you a wee bit more detail on that specific one.
So specifically just in terms of courts, a lot of their funding for COVID came because they were anticipating a shortfall in their income due to a lot of the civil work not being taken forward this year. However, their income position has actually been higher than they had originally anticipated. So they have an easement in income. Now, that is 675,000. It's offset by additional costs that they're incurring in terms of estates, for example, additional accommodation, because again of continued social distancing and so on, increased staff and security obviously for some of those, and then additional IT requirements. So the net position between their additional income and the additional costs is an easement then of 189,000. So again, because they're not making use of that money, as Deborah mentioned, we're returning that.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. That does bring clarity to that. And I would appreciate if you could come back, Deborah, on that other, the T-book, and also the language. Just is that a fair example of how those documents would be scripted at other times? Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sinead. Robin, did you want to come back in at all?
Yes, Chair. And I think I do agree with others who have spoken also on the T-book. You know, I do think we do deserve an explanation as to why money was held for one project and then didn't go forward, and at what stage was it identified as not going forward, and was there enough time to reallocate? So I think there are some questions which, through you, Chair, should be provided for the committee. It was, Chair, I did lose my place. It was the Office of the Police Ombudsman, again, a not insignificant amount of funds, nearly £500,000 being returned by the Police Ombudsman. That is a baseline, isn't it? I'm right that that's baseline area for it? Yeah. Maybe, can you tell me why is that £430,000, sorry, £430,000 being returned, and is there a regular amount being surrendered by the Police Ombudsman's office?
This was specifically on their case management system. This was the capital project which has slipped, so that's why that's being given back. So it's not a regular amount of funding.
Is it one-off for the Police Ombudsman?
Yeah.
Okay, and it's just slippage in what area? Sorry, did you say?
Case management system.
Case management system.
So, hold on a minute. Sorry. No, that's sorry. The case management system is the state pathology one, which is the £500,000 that's being surrendered on the capital. Are you referring to a different figure? Sorry.
I'm referring to the 430,000 historical investigations.
Yes. So again, this is the one where, because of the budget for 21-22 being announced so late at the end of the last financial year, that delayed Oponi being able to move forward with recruiting of staff, etc. So that is why there was slippage on this.
Okay, and you're saying this is a baseline function for the department. Could that 430,000 not have been allocated somewhere else for ease some other pressures?
So we have looked at all of our easements, and we are going to be using our easements to meet pressures. We finished this round with 1.7 million of pressures and 1.2 of easements, and we will wait until we know the outcome of the October monitoring round and those bids of 25 million to then decide how we utilise that small amount of funding, and then what decisions we will need to take around any other bids that are not met. So it will be used.
Okay, so and you're telling me that there isn't a regular surrender of money by the Police Ombudsman's office?
Well, in the case of this particular one, there was previous easements, and that's just because of the delays in them getting the staff recruited.
No, but you're telling me there isn't a regular surrender of money by the Police Ombudsman's office?
Well, it depends how we define regular. I would need to have a look back over what's happened in previous years. I don't have that information with me today, sorry.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Robin. Members, just by way of winding up that item, firstly, I want to thank Deborah, Andrea and Louise for their time with us today and for answering our questions. I think we do have some questions in our pack that I think we will be sending off to yourselves just to get some written responses, just some of the questions that we didn't get through today probably. And I think on the back of the question and answer session there, I think we could add Peter's question around the modern slavery and the correlation between the spend and the underspend. The court fees comparison in different jurisdictions that Robin had raised, and the TBUC, the specifics around that actual programme that Sinead had raised as well. So I think we could add those to our list of questions that we want to send to the department for a written response. So if we're in agreement to do that, I'll thank the officials for their time today, and I'll let you go.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, members, so just we'll round up all of that. We have a note of all those questions, and we'll send them off, and we'll try and get some answers for you in terms of the questions that you've raised. I think as well, it probably hasn't escaped our attention in the pack on the proposed reductions for in the budgets, the 2% in 2022 to 23, 4% 23 to 24, and 8% in 24 to 25. So I think it would be useful if the committee's in agreement if we write to those non-departmental public bodies and just ask for their views on those proposed reductions and how it would impact them and so on, because I think that would be useful for us as a committee just when we're assessing the 22 to 25 budget position, which I'm sure we'll do in the next short while. So are members in agreement that we do that and also action those follow-up questions to the department?
Great.
Okay, members, thank you. Okay, so listen, we'll move on to agenda item 5, and that is the proposed strategy for supporting and challenging women and girls in contact with the justice system, and the results of the consultation and proposed next steps. So again, this is another oral evidence session, and we have departmental officials attending the meeting today via Starleaf, and they're going to just outline the results of the consultation and the proposed way forward in relation to the development of a strategy for supporting and challenging women and girls in contact with the justice system. So the relevant pages are at 111 to 381 of your pack. And I just then welcome Stephen McCourt, who is the Deputy Director of Reducing Offending Division, Paula O'Neill, the Head of Reducing Offending Policy Unit, and, well, that's all we have.
I thought we were having 3 people.
There's somebody's hiding.
No, that's it. Joanne?
Maybe ask Stephen.
Sorry, yes, we have Stephen. Is that Joanne? Is that yourself? Yes, sorry. Joanne. Apology. Yeah, so we have Stephen McCourt and we have Joanne McPadden, Policy Official in the Reducing Offending Policy Unit at the Department of Justice. So again, just to advise you guys that the session is going to be reported by Hansard and the transcript will be published on the committee webpage. So Stephen and Joanne, you're very welcome. So can I just invite you now to give us just a brief outline of the key issues that have arisen from the consultation and what the department's proposed way forward might be. So over to yourselves.
Thank you, Chair, for the introductions. And just for clarity, it's Joanne beside me here in Castle Buildings, and Paul is on the separate screen. We're pleased to be able to brief the committee on the outcome of the public consultation and proposed next steps for a justice-wide strategy for supporting and challenging women and girls in contact with the justice system. Every year there are a small number of women and girls who come in contact with the justice system because of their behaviour. We know that the impact of women and girls offending, coming into contact with the justice system and entering custody is significant and can have a long-lasting ripple effect, not only on victims but on the women and girls' families, future generations and society as a whole. We know from research and, more importantly, from the lived experience of women and girls that when they face the justice system, it is often at a time of crisis or when they are at their most vulnerable. A system that many consider is designed primarily for men and does not recognise or cater for their specific needs. We want to help and support women and girls to move away from offending at the earliest opportunity, de-escalating the criminal justice response where appropriate, and adopting a more holistic approach. For these reasons, we wish to develop a specific strategy for women and girls in contact with the justice system. There has been extensive engagement on the strategy thus far, including ongoing discussions with the Strategy Development Group, which draws membership from the range of justice agencies and wider statutory partners that will be key to providing help and support beyond justice. I would like to spend a few moments updating you on engagement and the key issues that emerged from the public consultation on the proposed strategy. The public consultation ran for a period of 8 weeks from 14 January to 12 March 2021. Responses were welcomed in a range of formats, including online through Citizen Space and through a consultation questionnaire that could be submitted electronically or in hard copy. As well as the full consultation document, an easy read version was also produced to simplify the key points outlined in the more detailed document. Over 650 individuals and organisations were issued with links to the consultation. Key stakeholders were also offered the option of virtual consultation events, and officials met with 26 organisations online in an individual and group setting. A number of organisations, in particular the Youth Justice Agency, NAACRO and Turnaround Project, facilitated feedback from women and girls with a lived experience during the consultation period. Prisons have facilitated engagement with those in their care prior to the consultation. This engagement informed the consultation document and provided the policy team with significant insight into the women and girls' contact with the justice system. As you may have noted from your briefing paper, a total of 47 responses were ultimately received, with 26 of these providing answers to some or all of the consultation questions with varying degrees of detail. 8 responded to the easy read version, and the remaining responses were provided by either letter, email and practitioner facilitated summaries. We were very pleased that there was generally overwhelming support for the development of a justice-wide strategy. It was viewed as presenting a significant opportunity to create and deliver meaningful and positive change. Some of the respondents qualified their support on the basis that the strategy is trauma-informed, rights-based, and that victims and the voice of victims are appropriately represented, views we would unreservedly agree with. In addition, both the consultation report and the briefing paper issued to the committee highlight a number of key issues raised by respondents to the consultation. I'd just like to touch on a few of these. First, to successfully deliver a strategic coordinated approach to support and challenge women and girls, respondents considered that more detail is needed in regard to how the proposed priorities will translate into action. In line with the ethos of the proposed strategy, respondents recognise the need and vital role that preventative initiatives have in supporting women and girls. They also emphasise the need to ensure the strategy uses clear, consistent and trauma-informed language. Respondents considered that there is a need for distinction between women and girls in the strategy and its delivery. They underline the need to provide age-appropriate services and interventions, with some recommending that young women aged 16 to 21 should be supported as young women who offend. In regard to supporting women and girls at an early stage and throughout their contact with the justice system, respondents promoted a cross-departmental approach with sustainable funding and resources that underpin delivery of the strategy. They also highlighted the role of and reliance on the voluntary and community sector. The potential role of mentors and peer support was also recognised. Respondents considered that those who have been in contact with the justice system should be involved in supporting women and girls with similar experiences. The importance of smooth, supported transitions into, through and out of the justice system featured throughout responses. The need for supported accommodation and accessible community support in rural areas was also highlighted. Finally, respondents expressed the need for urgent and immediate action to support women and girls in contact with the justice system, many offering their support to progress this important work. In taking forward on the development of this strategy, supporting women and girls, we will need to take cognizance of these issues and ensure we engage with all relevant stakeholders as it progresses. This will include colleagues in the department, justice agencies and partners beyond the justice sphere and across sectors who are working on a range of areas which impact on this cohort. It is only by working together that we will make meaningful change and improve the life outcomes for women and girls and seek to address the harm caused. It remains our intention to adopt an approach that focuses on the range of contact with justice, on what can be done to prevent and divert women and girls from crime, supporting them to change in the community and helping improve their lives and circumstances on the occasion that they enter and leave custody. We want to build on the work that has come before. We see a new strategy as the next step in growing a culture of openness, partnership and continuous improvement in this very important area of justice. I want to stress that this approach is not about giving women and girls an easier option or justice going soft on crime. It is about recognising that sometimes the most appropriate response is not about punitive or what might be considered traditional justice. It is about taking a step back and asking what circumstances have brought this girl or woman in contact with the justice system, many of whom who have been the victims of crime themselves. Would an alternative approach that seeks to resolve some of the underlying issues be better for everyone? It is also importantly about women and girls taking responsibility for their actions and addressing the harm that has been caused by their behaviour. We are committed to delivering this strategy, but recognise that this important piece of work will be delivered in the context of wider competing challenges and pressures. We also understand that the impact of the global pandemic will undoubtedly exacerbate the vulnerabilities and trauma faced by many of the women and girls that come into contact with the justice system. It is our intention to finalise a women and girls strategy and associated action plan over the coming months, and these will be subject to Ministerial and Justice Committee consideration in due course. Chair, we're happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Stephen, and apologies to Paula O'Neill. I didn't formally introduce you at the start of the meeting because I couldn't see you on the screen. So we have Paula O'Neill, the Head of Reducing Offending Policy Unit, with us as well. So you're very welcome too, Paula. Yeah, again, thanks very much for that, Stephen. I have just a couple of questions, and then I'm going to throw it open to members. So just, you'd indicated there that there is the time scale for producing the draft strategy, maybe in the coming months. Are you able at all to be sort of more specific about that, and give us some indication of when we might, we might see something concrete coming before us?
Chair, we have a strategy development group that is working in relation to finalising the strategy at this point in time. They have considered and are considering at this point in time the summary responses, and we have it as an intention to have the strategy completed in this financial year. So by March next year, the strategy should be ready for publication.
Okay, that's good news. You see, just on the, so I just sort of have an issue with the term women and girls, because it's very broad. That's a really broad cohort of people if you just say women and girls, and I think if we're to put in place effective interventions, I think you have to drill down into that a wee bit more acutely. You touched on the fact that you could have older or younger women and girls, but you also can break that down into ethnic background. We have new nationals. We might have women and girls that are parents or maybe have current responsibilities. So, and all, the urban-rural divide as well. So I'm just, my question would be, how do you incorporate all those varying needs into, a single strategy? And, are there plans to sort of break it down more, more succinctly into those different groups? Because I think just women and girls is very broad, it's very open to interpretation.
No, you make a very valid point, and certainly something that was outlined in relation to the consultation. Because we are looking at a spectrum here from the minimum age of criminal responsibility, which is currently 10, all the way through to adult women within the custody system. So what we're trying to do in relation to the strategy is focusing in relation to those various different age spectrums in relation to understanding what both works for women and girls. And it's something in relation to, in particular, women, when it was mentioned in the consultation in terms of what works in relation to looking at young women between the ages of 16 to 21 or 18 to 21. It is something that we will have to take back to the strategy development group, in particular in relation to have a focused piece of work to see what works in relation to those various the age spectrum that we're looking at. One of the things I would say, and I'll invite Joanne and Paula to comment on from their experience in relation to the consultation and the engagement that they have. One of the things would be that just because we need to be age specific, because what works for young girls in relation to the youth justice system will not be appropriate in relation to young women, even in relation to the adult system. So it has to be very much gender specific in terms of her approach, and very much focused in relation to being age specific as well, as you mentioned, Joanne.
Yes, I was just going to say we also do need to a certain extent take a broader view in that women and girls generally have gender specific needs that should be addressed. So for example, if we're looking at any sort of interventions, whenever we look at women and girls in contact with the justice system, they're often, it's important for them to make real and lasting connections and relationships with individuals, and having, let's say, a key support worker to work with them works better than it might for men and boys. Also, we're cognizant of, depending on the age and depending on backgrounds, offending patterns and different profiles can be different. So we're mindful that there will need to be different approaches. I would also say any actions that we do come out of the strategy will also be a quality impact screen. So all the groups that you actually mentioned will be assessed against each of the actions and see what sort of mitigating action needs to be taken and needs to address, for example, women in rural communities or women from the BME, from a BME background, because we're mindful that they may be able to need to access services in a slightly different way.
Yep, no, absolutely. Thank you for that. Just one more, and then I'm going to pass it over to members. I know there was a view from the respondents that they weren't overly fussed on the general messaging or maybe even the title. I think they're probably referring to the words, maybe terms like challenging and managing. So, has there been any thought maybe to changing those words or tinkering about with the actual title of the strategy itself?
Yes, I think if you don't mind, Chair, I'll pick up on that one. We had the words empowering and challenging were both in the title. I also was sharing with Stephen just before we come in that we actually did flag that at the pre-consultation stage there was concerns about it, and we actually featured that in the consultation. So I think we would be looking to revisit the title and consider how it could be more trauma informed, because I know that was some concerns that some respondents had, and also they considered that empowering didn't necessarily take on the social constructs that often influence female offending, and that wider work had to be done by the department as well as the women themselves to support them changing behaviour.
One thing just to add, Chair, the aspect as well we also have to take into consideration is that in the use of the word challenge, we also have to think about the voice of the victim in relation to the work that we're doing, and that's something we always have to bear in mind in relation to. It may be appropriate in certain circumstances that it would be necessary in relation to the interventions to be challenging in relation to looking at an individual in terms of supporting them in relation to turning their lives around. But it is, as Joanne rightly says, a difficult one whenever we're looking at a trauma-informed approach, and certainly it is one that we're more than happy to reflect again in relation to the appropriate terminology that we can use to make sure it is consistent with the needs of the women and girls that we're looking at.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, agree with that. Thank you. Okay, so I've got Sinead and then Peter. Go ahead, Sinead.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the officials attending. I do think it's important that there is real clarity about the age reach of this strategy in terms of who it covered, particularly because of our extremely low age of criminal responsibility. So I would like to see the format of that, I suppose, more clearly or proposed, because it will have to be broken down by age. Because, as you said, there may be some common threads between girls and women, but there are wider differences as well in their needs. I would like to also, one of the things that jumped out at me was there was concerns expressed. 73% of women had physical or mental health conditions, and 36% showing signs of self-harm at time of for their detention. And I was taken aback by that number, but only because I also am aware that people who have a personality disorder are not classified, I understand, as having a mental health condition. And yet there's lots of evidence coming from prisons that this is a real problem in terms of the daily management. So those figures are quite startling, and I would ask what effort will this strategy have to take that into account and to tailor particularly for that group in any way. I'd also like to ask, there was reference made by research taken out by Shona Minson on the rights of the child and maternal sentencing and the Palgrave. And I have learned of some really harrowing stories where a mother who is serving quite a long sentence had a good relationship with her son and was doing homeworks every evening remotely with him and keeping that relationship alive. And it was certainly a win-win from everybody's reading of the situation. And the young boy apparently doing very well for himself. And suddenly that was removed. And the effect on the mother was obvious to see, but the effect on the child could not even be measured. And I really think this is an opportunity to look at those things. And will consideration be given to the rights of the child whose mother may be the person in prison? And also just like to follow up on then the community piece. What is the follow-on for women and girls, you know, if they have been detained and there's a follow-on piece? Who follows them and checks their welfare and that they are integrating? And if there is real ambition from this strategy, is there a bid for funding to support it? Because like many strategies, unless it's properly funded, it's likely to not hit the mark. I appreciate I've thrown a lot at you there, so thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and forgive me if I miss some of them, but I'll try to cover most of what the queries. In terms of the mental health provision, you're quite right in relation to say that in relation to mental health provision and individuals who are within custody, there is a significant the significant tendency in relation to mental health. So in terms of the strategy, we are tied into wider strategies in relation to support mechanisms in terms of the mental health strategy in general. And there will be that cross-executive support in relation to addressing the mental health needs. And indeed, we're working quite closely with the mental health champion in relation to supporting people to see how we can improve the provision in relation to mental health for women and indeed men within a custodial context. Certainly, mental health provision, obviously we work with both the statutory sector and in relation to the wider voluntary and community sector across a range of services in relation to addressing mental health need. Obviously South Eastern Health and Social Care Trust and indeed in relation to Action Mental Health, in relation to supporting people within the prison service care. In terms of contact between mothers and their children, certainly within the family strategy, in terms of the Northern Ireland Prison Service family strategy, is one of the important areas in relation to trying to maintain as much as we reasonably can in relation to supporting young people in relation to their continued contact with, particularly in relation to mothers who may be in custody. And it is quite rightly, as you say, a very important aspect that we need to maintain moving forward. It is something that we will be looking at in relation to the strategy in terms of how we can improve provision in relation to that area for all the reasons that you have outlined. And it is in terms of the action plan, in terms of the family strategy, one of the aspects that we will be trying to improve going forward. Obviously, in terms of where we are at with COVID at the moment, that has impacted in relation to contact and the level of contact that the prison service have tried to maintain in terms of people in our care and indeed in relation to their family circumstances. We have a number of areas that we seek to put in place in relation to improve it, indeed in relation to virtual provision, which has assisted particularly in areas of this, but you know, having direct contact between a child and the parent obviously is the ideal situation in terms of visitation, or indeed in relation to allowing them access and more frequent access to support them at times, including whenever they are doing homeworks, etc. Just in relation to the rights of the child, one of the things that you're quite right in terms of looking at is how we can incorporate the rights of the child in terms of those rights. In the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission, we're very clear in terms of looking in terms of the consultation document and the strategy to see how we can make sure that we accurately and fully adopt the rights of the child moving forward.
I was just going to add to those 2 points, just the first around mental health, and that would be that you probably note from your briefing paper and the report that you had, we had an innovation lab where we had a breadth of stakeholders, and there is absolutely no surprise to the fact that whenever they consider custody, one of the first priorities which does feature is looking at scoping and reviewing and improving mental health services and support that's available for those in custody. And I think, as you mentioned, personality disorder, there's also the fact that we have women and girls also who have experienced a history of trauma, and that trauma does not necessarily naturally fit into a particular area where mental health services can tap into. So we're mindful that you know, we need to be looking at how we can support those individuals in custody, and also whenever they are going out into the community. And also, whenever Stephen had mentioned there about children and families, I know there was some shocking information in the reports that Shona Minson did around the impact on children of, for example, the pandemic and what impact it had on visits and children's visits. So we're very mindful of that, and I think if you look at the priorities in the family strategy, there's a priority around making sure that visits are done at a time and in a way that can support children actually spending time, because sometimes the time isn't ideal. And as far as I'm aware, there still is there's ongoing initiatives across the different establishments around bedtime reading and around doing homework. So I do think virtual visits has brought quite a few benefits, but obviously we're aware of the impact of the lack of face-to-face visits up until more recently has had on children and young people being able to see and speak to their parents, and particularly their mothers.
Chair, do you mind if I also add to the member's point on mental health provision? It's just to state that on our strategy development group, the Department of Health is a member of that. Several officials from the department sit on that group, and given that South Eastern Trust provide health provision within the prison setting, and that's a very important connection for us. So we have been working with health officials to date in relation to the development of the consultation, and will continue to engage with them on matters such as health, physical health and mental health.
Thank you. And Chair, through yourself, if I may just come back on that, I think that's a valid point in terms of the also the personality disorders, but also trauma. And I know certainly members in this committee will know with the domestic abuse bill and coercive control and human trafficking, we've seen all those other effects that that are part of the cocktail, if you like, that can be a reason for a woman ending up in prison. But I do take that point, and I would press on the final point then about the funding, that the strategy would be properly funded. But thank you to the panel for your time. Thank you and for your answers.
Thank you, Sinead. So we'll have Peter and then Robin.
Thank you, folks, so far for the information you've given us. I suppose we're at a particular stage in relation to this. We're not at the end point, and it does strike me that it's fairly clear that not simply the substance of this is critically important, but also, as we've seen around a couple of the areas we already touched on, the importance, the delicacy of the correct terminology, the correct language. And I know, for instance, the Chair has raised the point about whether particular terms are appropriate, and we can debate as well about the limitations in terms of women and girls, or whatever way anything is phrased. I suppose to some extent I appreciate there's very clearly been within this an attempt to try and be sensitive and delicate in terms of language, because I suppose getting the language wrong in one direction or another can lead to unfortunate levels of either offence or concern that's been raised. I suppose the one downside sometimes that can lead then to a little bit of confusion or lack of clarity of what the objectives are at times. Can I ask, obviously, as the focus of this strategy is essentially on female either offenders or those at risk of offending, I think with the very appropriate and worthy aim of trying also to either prevent offending from occurring, or for those who have been involved in offending to take them out of that pathway of offending. Can I just ask, I think there is a corresponding though linkage, while it will be different services, different approaches, different strategies there. If we're looking effectively at female offenders, female potential offenders, those are supposed to use the phrase that are in contact with the judicial system. Also from a female perspective, can be female victims, or they can be female witnesses of crime. And obviously those are not probably particularly the focus of this particular strategy. But I wonder just if you could outline what level of coordination and read across with the provision of services for those who are female victims, female witnesses of crime, because I'm conscious, I think, that for this strategy to succeed, not only will everything need to be got right within the strategy, but also we need to see a level of public buy-in to whatever the strategy is there, to make sure, for instance, that it's given the level of prioritisation. And I just see a slight degree of danger, but because I suppose we're at this stage not seeing what the final strategy is, that if there is too much of a direct disjoint between a knowledge of what is being provided and what is being done in terms of interventions for female offenders, for instance, compared to direct victims of crime, it does risk a possibility that if it's seen that the provision of services is at a higher level and level of support for offenders compared to victims, could lead, I think, to a level of either public misunderstanding or a level of concern that's raised that, for instance, female victims of crime or those also involved with the criminal justice system are not being given the level of support that is at least corresponding with those who are offenders in relation to that. And while I think some of the services will be different between the two, clearly, I'm just asking what level of coordination or read across there is between those different sections of females that are, to use the phrase, in direct contact with the criminal justice system.
Thank you, Chair. No, you make absolutely valid points in relation to the issue you have raised. And indeed, in terms just from the victim's perspective, one of the things coming out of the consultation was the importance of making sure that the victim's voice is front and centre in relation to the strategy. And indeed, we will be moving to include victim support within the strategy development group moving forward, although we keep in very close contact and consulted them quite closely in relation to it. But we think it is important, that they be specifically included to ensure that the victim's voice is heard. But you're also quite right, in indicating that if you look at poverty, child caring responsibilities, pregnancy, complex childhood trauma, and experiences of domestic and sexual violence, all of those are among the needs of many women who have offended. And indeed, the importance that we're looking at in terms of gender-specific diversion, looking at pre-trial options, looking at alternatives to imprisonment, that also needs to be factored against respect for the rule of law and the rights of victims, as you point out. And that all has to be central to the kind of gender-responsive approach that we're seeking to achieve, not only through this strategy, but also in relation to a number of other elements that we're bringing forward in terms of wider work through the department. If you're looking at the review of the Inspire model for PBNI, in terms of the approach and how it will dovetail with the strategy moving forward, or indeed in relation to looking at the work that we're currently working on in relation to a progressive youth justice system, and in terms of a child first approach in relation to that. So all of those aspects taken together, is a balancing act in relation to not only looking at offending behaviour, but also in relation to the fact that many of the women themselves have been the victims of some very significant trauma in relation to their lives, and how we balance that out moving forward is important.
Sorry, Chair, I was just going to add to that, and the one thing I think is important around this strategy is we are focusing as much as we can around prevention and diversion, which in pure economic terms is less costly than supporting women in custody at a later stage. So, we recognise that although there may be investment needed initially if we're talking about prevention and diversion, that down the line we could potentially realise benefits. And we also are mindful that whenever we're putting bids forward, we are essentially going to have to prioritise as a department across the board.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Robin and then Rachel.
Thank you very much, Chair, and again, welcome the delegates to the committee, and thank you for your attendance. Just a couple of simple questions, I think. It was in terms of the consultation process. It was a 8 weeks consultation process and 47 returns, 31 from organisations and 16 from private individuals. Is that sufficient, do you think, or are there any gaps in there that you might have expected returns from?
Well, as well as certainly what you cite as responses, we have also undertaken, as Joanne alluded to earlier, innovation labs in relation to bringing people together. And both Joanne and Paula also spent nearly a week in Ash House in High Bankwood, interviewing about 50 females who have been obviously directly affected in relation to the custodial system. Yeah. So certainly from our perspective, we think the responses has been quite broad. We have very much welcomed the interaction that we have had, both from the voluntary and community sector and other organisations in the 26 that we allude to, and Joanne can perhaps give you some indication of the breadth of those organisations that responded. But at this point in time, aside from the direct, whilst we have consulted with victim support, but we feel that they need to be front and centre in relation to the strategy development, and as I say, we'll bring them in. We don't see any other significant gaps at the present.
No, I was just going to say we had thought 8 weeks was an appropriate amount of time, but anybody that wanted an extension was granted one, because we wanted to make sure we got a balanced view from organisations. So as Stephen had mentioned, we had the housing executive responded, we had the police responded, the Simon community, the Royal College of Speech and Language, so victim support, women's aid. So there was a breadth of responses that reflected both women and girls who maybe supporting women and girls who had offended or maybe were in the cusp of offending, but also supporting individuals who have been victims potentially of that offending. Also, what I would say is that there was an extensive amount of pre-consultation. For example, we sent letters out to key stakeholders with a broad framework of what we wanted to put in the consultation document and key priorities. And why I mention that is, for example, at that stage, we got a response and had meetings with the Safeguarding Board, for example, who didn't provide a formal response, but we have very much captured and are aware of the information they had suggested. So also around the consultation, it was done at around about the time, as far as I know, it was maybe the mental health strategy, so went out at the same time. So I think there was probably a range of organisations that had a number of consultations that they were interested in responding to. But I do think we've got a pretty good picture from respondents, giving a wide range of views.
Chair, do you mind? I'm sorry. I was going to come in with an additional point, but happy for the member to continue.
Okay, sorry, Chair. I mean, it wasn't a criticism, it was a question I was asking about the breadth of. It just it jumped out at me that, and you've mentioned the speech and therapy from the South Eastern Health and Social Care Trust. Am I right in thinking that they're the only branch of the South Eastern who replied, but none of the other trusts had an official response to it? Am I right in that?
Sorry, are you the Royal College of Speech and Language Therapy?
Yes.
No, that is that's not associated with the trust. That's just the college. The South Eastern Trust essentially facilitated a workshop with women in High Bank Wood, and also all of the trusts would have been issued with letters. However, as Paula had mentioned earlier, because the department actually sits on the group, they would also have the opportunity to filter in any comment or any information through the strategy development group.
Okay, that's grand. In terms of the, I mean, I have to say, I think the priorities to be translated into action, I think that's a very comprehensive list. I came down to the very last one, and the need for urgent and immediate action to support women and girls. And then I tried to find what the next steps were recommending within the report, but I couldn't quite find those. Maybe, I'm sure that's my fault, but maybe you could outline what the next steps are.
Certainly, Chair. Well, it's not your fault. I can assure you it's because it's not there in terms of the documentation in relation to looking at what we would class as urgent and immediate. That's one of the things that will be taken back in relation to looking within the strategy development group in terms of those actions that we consider that we can meet in a very, very short timescale, and that would be having the most significant benefit in relation to not only girls within the criminal justice system, but also women within a custodial setting, and indeed in relation to the community. So, Chair, that's something that we'll be looking at in terms of prioritisation in relation to the action plan moving forward.
And if I was just going to add, Chair, yes, you actually, if you blink, you might have missed it, because next steps is literally paragraphs 5.7 or 5.3 to 5.7, which is really, as Stephen had said, the fact that there's lots of issues we need to consider, and that the strategy coming out of it will be more detailed and more identify more deliverables.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. No, I think you understand your question in terms of the consultation response, because when we were both members of the Communities Committee, we had this issue in terms of the licensing bill. So, and it was, I know there's varying degrees of uptake in terms of different consultations, so that's a fair enough question. Rachel, do you want to go ahead?
Thank you, Tara. Thank you for your presentation and for the documents. I mean, a lot of it's been covered already. So I'm just wanting to know if a couple of points. Is there any sort of in the strategy? Obviously, you'll be developing a final strategy. Is there anything at this stage though that has come through that will require primary legislation?
Certainly. There may be aspects in relation to the work that we're looking at that may or may not require legislation. There's nothing at the moment that jumps out at me that may require primary legislation.
Okay, no, that's good to know. Because I know there's a lot of things in it which has come up in the consultation, like improved data collection. That's something that committees discussed before. And its publication, and also it's not the first time that I've heard about uncertainty on pre-sentencing reports, and understanding, and what if any mitigating circumstances were taken into account in that kind of thing that came through in the consultation. And again, that sort of thing, is that not something that could be done now rather than having to wait for it possibly being included in a finalised strategy? That's more of a process thing rather than needing to be in a strategy if it's about communication and information sharing?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more, Chair, in terms of the comment. If there are easy wins as such that we can take forward without having to wait for the completion of the strategy, we will do so, and that's particularly one area. Just reflecting in relation to your earlier question, there is the possibility in terms of legislation that may or may not impact in terms of looking at a restorative justice approach in relation to, in particular, but that would be not necessarily gender specific, but more wider, incorporating both men and women. And that's something we're looking at in the context of the wider adult restorative justice strategy. Some of the elements coming out of that may point towards legislation, and certainly from Judge Marinin in his hate crime review, and indeed Judge Gillen pointed to aspects that may or may not lead to legislation. So it's not beyond the bounds of possibility that there may be necessary for legislation that will also benefit in relation to this particular strategy, but it's not specific to it, if you know what I mean.
No, thank you. Appreciate that. Obviously, I think that even with restorative justice, there was things that were supposed to be legislated for by the end of this mandate that have been removed from the Justice Bill in relation to restorative practice and restorative justice. So certainly that kind of legislation has obviously been very important, but sadly it'll not be hitting the Assembly chamber this mandate. I suppose just in terms of a strategy then, the violence against women and girls strategy is something that committees we discussed before. I tried to amend the domestic abuse bill to no avail on it, and it's something that the Assembly has now called for. I know that is with TEO, but in terms of tying in this kind of strategy, would there be an intention then of joining in and engaging then with the Executive Office on any violence against women and girls strategy? Because we can see the parallels, especially with the consultation responses.
And certainly in relation to the work that we're engaged in terms of this strategy, if there is a requirement in terms of engaging with TEO, we will take that forward in relation to any lessons learned, both in relation to our consultation, but in the wider piece of work in relation to violence against women and girls, because throughout the justice system and in relation to membership of our particular strategy development group, colleagues in relation to domestic violence sit on it, so they have a particular let's say, interest in relation to that wider violence against women and girls strategy in terms of its development and taking it forward. So lessons will be learned and shared across the piece. Just in terms of touching on your point in relation to the impact of the provision in terms of the clause on restorative justice being removed from the miscellaneous provisions bill, there is a workaround in relation to that we have in terms of agency arrangements in place with the Secretary of State to allow the Minister of Justice to accredit organisations, so it isn't that it will in the short term causes difficulty, but in the long term obviously we wish to rectify the overall provision.
No, thank you, and you have my support there on that one. I suppose a bit of a maybe this has been considered or maybe it hasn't, but this is sort of tying in with the Ministry of Justice in 2018. They published a female offender strategy, and it stated that there's persuasive evidence that short custodial sentences are less effective in reducing reoffending than community orders. So I'm wondering if the department has looked at that, or is that something that would be looking for in coming forward?
Certainly in relation to looking at short custodial sentences, whether it be for women and men, we have the same problem in relation to the impact that somebody's time within a custodial setting can benefit from when they are in a short custodial sentence, in particular, not least to the fact that the time spent in remand counts against that, and we have even less time unless somebody within custody wishes to engage in intervention programmes or whatever. It is something that we are looking at to see how that we can not only look at various programmes that we can, let's say, deliver to cater for people that are on short sentences, but also learn lessons in relation to other jurisdictions in terms of what can be done both within a custodial setting and in the community in relation to the through the gate piece. Because one of the things you'll notice in relation to the consultation document was the importance in relation to looking at that through the gate support, particularly for women and girls. And that's something that in particular we are looking to see how we can work across the executive with other departmental colleagues to see how we can connect to services in a more timely way in the community for people moving out of custody in terms of meeting their needs within a community context in the post-custodial environment. We know from our statistics that people are most vulnerable in relation to release from custody on a 3 to 4 month period. And that's something in particular works not only for women but men as well, and is something we're trying to focus on to see what we can do to address that particular period of time in terms of reoffending, because the reoffending rate tends to go up and then comes down after that critical period in leaving custody, so it is an important area for us.
Thank you. And oh, sorry, go on ahead.
Sorry, Chair, I was just also going to add, you know, whenever we're talking about women and girls who are coming in short sentences, they often present with complex needs that can't necessarily be addressed within that short sentence. So I think it's also important for us to consider around tapping into like the substance use strategy, the mental health strategy, to realise significant benefits where they are supported in the community and indeed transition into the community.
Yeah, thank you very much, 100%. I suppose one final point from me there is about it was something that's very, very sadly happened, and it was in a report from the Prisons and Probation Ombudsman in England. It came out September this year. It's investigating the death of a newborn baby in prison in 2019. And the mother was 18 years old and was on remand for a robbery. And despite repeated calls for help, she gave birth alone in her cell. And there's now calls for an end to the imprisonment of pregnant women from a number of organisations. And there's been a lot of research coming out of Coventry University, which sheds a wee bit more light on this issue and highlighting countries do not imprison pregnant women or severely restrict their incarceration. It includes Brazil and Russia and Ukraine. So I'm just wondering if this is something that the department have looked at before, or if this has come across, and do you see this issue being part of the forthcoming strategy? Yeah, and certainly, Chair, we know that, you know, the tragic circumstances in relation to that's just been outlined, it's just horrific. And certainly we know that there is an interest to see how many women have given birth while serving in prison in Northern Ireland over the last 10 years, and the answer to that is 6. And there hasn't been anybody who's given birth inside prison premises over that period of time. You know, the women in question have been catered for within a hospital context. The prison service in relation to have various practice standards in relation to looking at how they address the needs of women in care, and certainly in terms of the most recent Sijini report in relation to Ash House, particularly commented in a number of important recommendations in relation to how they could improve service. And certainly we can come back to the committee in terms of where those recommendations currently stand. But we know in terms of current provision that in those circumstances that individuals are within residential setting, within the wider healthcare setting within the prison, and not within the normal, let's say, residential units within Hague Wood. One of the things, and quite rightly, that has been said is that this is one of the areas that we wish to look at in terms of circumstances, and one of the things that in order to do so that we wish to focus on is about alternatives to custody, because it is important in relation to looking at particular circumstances through, whether it be through information that's provided through pre-sentence reports or whatever, that if there is an alternative to custody, that
should be available in relation to the judiciary to allow them to make an informed decision in terms of whether it be remand or indeed the provision of a custodial sentence. And that's certainly something we wish to look at.
Thank you very much. Thank you for giving me the answer to my QW. Appreciate it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rachel. Okay, members, nobody else has indicated, so we'll draw that to a close there. So I think it's really good that, first of all, that we have strong support for a new strategy. So I think this committee will definitely be looking forward to considering the action plan and any draft strategy that comes before us in the next short while. So can I just thank Stephen and Paula and Joanne for your time today. It's been really useful, so I'll let you go. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay, members. Okay, thank you for that. So just on the back of that, can I just inform members that subject to any comments from this committee, the department intends to publish the consultation responses on the departmental website in the next short weeks. The department has also indicated that the views expressed and issues raised in the consultation responses will inform the development of a draft strategy and associated action plan. And these will also need to take account of the findings and recommendations of the ongoing criminal justice inspection on how the criminal justice system treats females in conflict with the law, and that's likely to be published in the coming months. The updated draft strategy and associated action plan will be subject to Ministerial and Justice Committee consideration in due course. So, members, that is just for noting at this stage, unless anybody, feel strongly about submitting any additional views or comments to the department at this stage. Are we happy to wait for the draft strategy to come before us on the action plan? Yep. Okay, yep. Thank you. Okay, members, thanks for that. We'll move on to agenda item 6, and that is the damages return on investment bill and the summary of the committee's informal deliberation. So you'll find information relating to this at pages 26 to 30 of your table pack. And that outlines the position in relation to the clauses and schedule of the damages bill and a number of other issues following our informal deliberations last week. The committee agreed that it was content with the provisions of the bill and did not wish to bring forward any amendments at this stage. While content with the schedule as drafted, members did indicate that the provision of the 0.5 of a percentage point further margin of error in paragraph 10 may be something they would want to come back to. Members also indicated that they may wish to give further consideration to the issues relating to periodical payment orders. So, members, for your information, the committee will undertake its formal clause-by-clause consideration of the bill at our meeting on the 7th of October. The department has been asked to review the Hansard of our discussion in relation to PPOs and provide any further information or clarification on the process relating to PPOs and the issues discussed that may be helpful to the committee before our meeting on the 7th of October. So, members, can I ask you just to note that position with regard to the damages bill, unless there's any other issues members want to raise at this time?
Great.
Oh, no? Oh, great. Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to agenda item 7, the Civil Jurisdiction and Judgements 2005 Hague Convention and 2007 Hague Convention Amendment Regulations 2022. And this is at pages 384 to 392 of your meeting pack. So, members, the Minister of Justice has consented to the extension to Northern Ireland of the Civil Jurisdiction and Judgements 2005 Hague Convention and 2007 Hague Convention Amendment Regulations 2022. The Department has indicated that the regulations, which are made under Section 2 of the Private International Law Implementation of Agreements Act 2020 and are subject to the draft affirmative parliamentary procedure, are highly technical and amend the UK-wide legislation. The 2020 Act now implements domestically the 2005 Hague Convention on Choice of Court Agreements and the 2007 Hague Convention on the International Recovery of Child Support and Other Forms of Family Maintenance. The regulations set out the text of the conventions and the UK's reservations and declarations as new schedules to the Civil Jurisdictions and Judgements Act 1982. They do not amend the implementation of the conventions or change the reservations or declarations. So just to remind members that the committee agreed to support the Minister of Justice in seeking the Assembly's endorsement of a legislative consent motion relating to provisions in the 2020 Act, and the Committee's deliberations on the matter were set out in a report on the LCM, which is included at pages 386 to 392 of the meeting pack. So, at this stage, members are just being asked to note the position regarding the extension to Northern Ireland of the Civil Jurisdiction and Judgements 2005 and 2007 Hague Convention Amendment Regulations 2000, I think that's 2002, 2022, that's the typo. Unless they wish to make any comments or require any further information or clarification. And if you all understood that, then fair play to you. So I take it there's no comments at this stage. Okay, so we'll note that item. So members, we'll move on to agenda item 8, the domestic abuse offence training and awareness materials, and this is an update for us. Members, you'll find the information relating to this at 394 to 402 of your pack. So the department has provided an update on the training and awareness materials being developed in preparation for the new domestic abuse offence coming into operation in late February 2022. The update covers an e-learning training package targeted towards frontline public sector professionals who may come into contact with the victim or abuser during the course of their duties, the PSNI training plan, the PPS training plan, a multimedia public awareness campaign, a digital awareness tool to complement the e-learning and public awareness campaign, and a public-facing infographic which will be shared with the committee when finalised. The department has also offered to provide a further update in the new year if the committee would find that helpful. So, members, I'm asking you to note the update, and if the members are agreeable, can we schedule a further update in the new year, unless any other members require clarification or information in the meantime. Are we happy to receive that in the new year?
Great.
Yep. Great.
Chair, could I seek some clarification, please?
Of course, go ahead.
It's regarding the PSNI. Please, firstly, I really want to welcome this update. It is good to keep on top of what's happening. But in terms of the PSNI training on this, I'd just be keen to know who actually is charged with developing this training programme. And I also note on the list, I think they're using a link, like an internal infrastructure to include people, and there are some obvious people or organisations missing from that system. And off the top of my head, I noticed the Commissioner for Older People, and I think there can be some stereotypes around this sort of crime, and older people are as vulnerable to it, sadly, as everyone else. So just to find out, are there plans to extend who will have access to that link system? I don't know why the Commissioner for Older People isn't in the system, but maybe for good reason. But I just wondered, is there going to be, I suppose, a sweeping assessment of who may have been left out in terms of getting access to this? Thank you.
Thank you, Sinead, and we've taken a note of that, so we'll attempt to get the clarification on those questions for you as soon as possible. I lost the screen, but I think, Rachel, you have your hand up there as well.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Just to say, the all-party group on domestic abuse got a preview of the e-learning training package a couple of weeks ago, and it was brilliant. It's really, really good, and thanks to Veronica and the team for the demonstration. But Sinead's question is something that was raised, and it's to do with technology access, but there was going to be a link sent out, but I can't for the life of remember me exactly what it was. There was like a different package, so there is something, but absolutely would welcome that clarity just for my own head too. And I know we couldn't put it onto the face of the bill, but I wonder if there's any information on what information is being made available for the judiciary through the Judicial Studies Board on this new offence, and particularly as well with the lay magistracy and those that would be dealing with, say, with the family courts. Just if there is any information available on what new information has been given then.
Okay, Rachel, yeah, that's all very valid. Again, yeah, we'll take note of those. I presume, Sinead and Rachel, you'd want this before the briefing in the new year, this information. We get it as soon as we can, so we're prepared for the next briefing. Yep.
If possible,
if possible.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, no problem. We'll definitely attempt to do that. Okay, thank you, members. Okay, if we move on to agenda item 9, which is the implementation of the recommendations of the Gillen review into serious sexual offences in Northern Ireland. And again, this is an update for us, so you'll find this at pages 404 to 471 of your meeting pack. So just to remind members that the committee considered a written update on the progress to deliver the implementation plan for the Gillen review recommendations in relation to serious sexual offences cases at the meeting on the 11th of February. The committee noted the position at the time and requested a further update in September. The department has provided a written update which summarises the current position and future plans for the main programme work streams and outlines the current position regarding funding and resources and the work of the Education and Awareness Group. The briefing paper indicates that good progress has been made, with 28% of all the Gillen recommendations now fully implemented. Work is underway in over 60% of the remaining recommendations, and less than 12% have not yet been initiated, with the vast majority of these requiring legislation that is not scheduled for this mandate. The department is also advised that the partially and fully implemented recommendations are already having a positive impact on victims. Members, this is just to note, unless we require any further information or clarification. I would just have a couple of points that I would like to raise. So, you know, the briefing pack states that it's had a positive impact on victims. So, I mean, that's pretty broad. I mean, just throw that out there. So, I think we would need just a little bit more detail on what those positive impacts are, and if we can have a good look at it, just exactly how far-reaching they are, and also of the 60% of the outstanding recommendations that have been started, how many is expected to be concluded before the end of this mandate? So I think that would be useful for us to know as well. Again, members, I can't see my screen, but Rachel, you might want to raise something here, all right?
Yeah, thank you, as usual. I might have missed it in the pack, but of the 12% outstanding that require legislation, it's not possible in the mandate, and I fully appreciate that. Do we have a list of what they are? Again, I might have missed that just in the briefing pack, because it was quite substantial. But if we do know what it is there work going on to prepare for that legislation to be enacted, in the next mandate? Is there preparatory work going on? And second of all, is with regard to the protocol to expedite serious sexual offence cases involving children under 13 years old. I know that had rolled over, and it says in the pack that it was the further extension was over in October. It's October tomorrow, so I'm just wondering if there's been any consideration given to continuing this, and does this mean that as of tomorrow the protocol on expediting serious sexual offences cases involving children is no longer? Because I think that's something the committee may have an interest in.
Absolutely. No, members, look, we'll get answers to those questions as soon as we can. We are due to get a further update in early March 2022. So hopefully members are in agreement that we go ahead and schedule that. But in the meantime, we'll try and get clarification on those other issues that were raised today. Okay, members, I can't see you on my screen, but I presume there's no more questions in relation to that. Okay, so we'll move on to agenda item 10, which is Deaths Abroad, the final report on the commencement of section 49(1) of the Coroners and Justice Act 2009. So you'll find this at pages 473 to 503 of your meeting pack. And just to remind members that at the request of the Minister of Justice, the presiding coroner appointed Coroner Patrick McGurgan in October 2020 to chair a working group to explore the implications for the justice system of commencing section 49(1) of the Coroners and Justice Act 2009, to allow a coroner to hold an inquest into a death abroad where the body has been repatriated and is lying in Northern Ireland. Coroners in England and Wales, Scotland and Ireland already have jurisdiction to investigate a death occurring abroad. The working group was originally to have reported by the end of January 2021, but required more time to consider a number of complex issues and resourcing implications. The group has already completed its work, and the department has provided a copy of the report which outlines significant practical issues which would limit the effectiveness of an inquest into a death abroad. The working group has therefore concluded the practical challenges of investigating a death abroad if section 49 was commenced would lead to public expectation which, in most cases could not be met. This would leave families disappointed and ultimately risking confidence in the justice system. The working group has therefore recommended that Section 49(1), as it currently stands, should not be commenced, and instead new legislative provisions could be put in place which would provide for more managed and proportionate jurisdiction when investigating a death abroad. So again, just to advise members, the Minister of Justice is open to the view that rather than commence Section 49, some more managed way of approaching the matter should be sought, and she's likely to consider that a consultation paper on reforming the jurisdiction of a coroner in respect of a death abroad may be the way forward. The Department has indicated that while it will continue to progress this matter, it is unlikely that resources will enable a consultation paper to issue during this mandate. So really, members, what we're asking today, firstly we're asking your views on whether you're content to note the report of the working group and the position of the Minister of Justice, or whether you wish to submit any views or comments on the matter or require any further information, either in writing or by way of an oral briefing. We have had correspondence from Jeffrey Donaldson MP. He's previously written to the committee on behalf of an individual. So, you know, if members are in agreement, I think it's only right that we respond back to Jeffrey, advising him of the latest position on the issue. So, just members, I'm going to throw it out. Sinead, I think you've indicated.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I suppose I would like to go on record to welcome this report back and to thank, I know that the Kevin Bell Repatriation Trust were heavily involved in the work on this, and I would like to go on record to thank them and for everything that they do. But I do find it a bit disappointing that all those efforts really have come to a stalling position where there is no definitive outcome, and that the Minister really hasn't made any sort of a decision. And I do take on board the point where you wouldn't want to get the hopes up of any family or loved one who was facing such a devastating set of circumstances. But that said, are there not ways of managing those expectations? Have the department fully explored that? And rather than just rule out entirely the possibility of enacting this. So I just would like a bit more detail on, I wouldn't want to dismiss the whole piece of work based on that one reasoning. I don't really follow it, and I would just need some more clarity on it if possible. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. No, certainly concur with those comments, Sinead. I mean, again, I'm only new onto the committee, and looking at the forward work programme, it's pretty heavy duty, but I mean, I think if there was a way that we could maybe schedule in an oral briefing or even a written briefing that is, you know, it's more substantial in terms of information and detail, would members be agreeable to looking at that?
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay. Thank you, members. We'll take this away. We'll have a look at it, and we'll see if we can fit in either an oral briefing or a written briefing to the committee just on this. So, thank you, members. Okay, listen, we'll move on to agenda item 11, which is correspondence. There's 4 items of correspondence at pages 505 to 561 of your pack, and there's 1 item at page 32 of your table pack. So can I just draw your attention to one of the items in the meeting pack and one in the table pack. So again, if members have any, if there are any other items of correspondence with which they have a particular interest, just indicate to me and I'll bring you in. So item 11.4 of the pack is correspondence from the Committee for Finance regarding New Decade New Approach funding of 40 million for the unique circumstances of Northern Ireland. And to advise members, the Executive Office has indicated that detailed spending proposals in relation to the unique circumstances funding are to be produced by the NI and UK departments. So I'm looking agreement from yourselves today that we ask the Department of Justice for its detailed spending proposals relating to the unique circumstances funding. Agreed?
Agreed.
Item 11.6 is a response from the Criminal Justice Inspection Northern Ireland regarding the timescale for completion of the review into the operation of care and supervision units in the Northern Ireland Prison Service. And the Chief Inspector anticipates that the review report will be published in November and will inform the committee of the exact date when known. She has also indicated that she is happy to discuss the report following publication if the committee would find that useful. So again, members, that's just to note, but we will, there will be further consideration given to whether it would be useful for the Chief Inspector to attend to discuss the report once members have had the opportunity to consider it. So once that's been published and we've had a look at it, we'll schedule that meeting with the Chief Inspector. Rachel, sorry, again, I can't see, the screen's gone. So.
You're okay, no, it's grand. I just was going to say, I would think, without being presumptive, I think we probably will want to speak to the Inspector after the report. Just it's something that the committee's been taking an interest in, and that's last year. And I suppose just to put it out there for consideration, once we do get a report, might be an opportunity for the committee to invite the Independent Monitoring Board to a committee, because it's the board and its members are not someone that we've heard from before in terms of their role with inspecting our prisons. So just to put that out there as a suggestion, but I'm happy to make that formally if we're discussing this in November.
Okay, Rachel, thank you very much. Yep, no problem with any of that. Okay, so members, can I just ask, are you content to action the remaining items of correspondence as set out in the cover sheet, or whether there's any other comments you wish to make in relation to any other items of correspondence?
Agreed.
No, happy, okay. Agenda item 12, chairperson's business. There's no chairperson's business today. Agenda item 13 is AOB, so if any members have any other items of business, do you want to raise them now? No, don't think so. Alright, agenda item 14, date, time and place of next meeting. So our next meeting will be next Thursday, the 7th of October at 2 p.m. in room 30. Okay, thanks very much, members. Appreciate your patience today. Thank you.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This